Hi, welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and thanks for watching. Well, we are 6 months into Governor Rendell's second term. How's he doing? What's he doing? We'll find that out with a panel of the state's leading journalists after these words.
This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers, a fast-paced, unrehearsed weekly discussion with and about the leaders who shape your world. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Hi, welcome back to the program, and again, thanks to our viewers, and thanks to our viewers in WGAL-TV on Channel 8, where we are the #1 show in the market. We have more viewers than any other program at 11 o'clock on Sunday. You make it all possible. Thanks for doing that. Well, joining me, as often is the case, is a trio of top journalists. We're going to talk about Governor Rendell. How's he doing? What's going on in the state legislature? This is a 6-month review. Here joining me, as often is the case, is Robert Swift from Times Shamrock newspapers. He changed. He used to be with Ottawa News. Am I allowed to say that?
That's correct.
I can say it. Robert, thanks for joining us. John Micek from the Allentown Morning Call, and John Baer from the Philadelphia Daily News. Journalists, all columnists sometimes. John, you're a full-time columnist.
Full-time columnist.
Full-time, and you're a columnist some of the times and a reporter.
Yes.
And you used to write a column.
I still do a weekly column.
I'm telling you, we got every base covered. All right, Governor Rendell wins. John Baer, I want to start with you. I'll say 60%. He says 61% of the vote. He gets reelected. During the course of his campaign, he doesn't mention this big agenda. He comes in February, delivers his annual budget message, and all of a sudden there's this huge, progressive, ambitious agenda.
Yeah.
Take it from there.
Well, I mean, part of that, Terry, as you know, is elective politics. When an incumbent runs for re-election, particularly against somebody who is attacking him, what he can do is talk about what he has done. And Rendell did have some-first-term accomplishments, so naturally that's what he talked about in his campaign. The agenda is really not this year's agenda. It's the second-term agenda.
Yep.
These are all the things that he would like to do in the second term, and so he puts them all out there, knowing he's not going to get them all this year, knowing he might not get any this year. But that's the way he governs. That's the way he did the first time around, and that's the way he does now. It should be no surprise.
Go ahead, John. Did that come as a big surprise, this agenda? I mean, I didn't hear much about this. Go ahead.
Well, the one thing we're wondering about is where he was going to go next. Having gotten 7 of his major goals throughout the course of his first term, education, funding, the environment, that kind of thing, it was a question of what he was going to do next. But, you know, John is correct. It is a second-term agenda. What's different about it, though, is it is a second-term agenda that has to take place within 2 years.
Yeah.
Rendell, as we know, is term-limited, can't run again, and his power is going to start bleeding profusely after the 2008 election. So he is now constrained to try to get as much of this stuff through as he possibly can before the midterm.
And he keeps reminding everyone, Governor Rendell, that is, that he can't run again, that he's not going to run again. I think that's his famous. You know, I don't know if anybody ever believes politicians when they say that, but
not run for governor.
Yeah, he's constantly makes reference to that his last campaign's over. But, you know, one of the issues that he's undertaking here, energy independence in his view, that's an issue that has not been dealt with here for 25 years. Mm-hmm. That was very big when I first came here as a young reporter, and it just faded off the landscape. Transportation, his commission made his report 2 weeks after the election. So that shows you, once again, that was not discussed during the election. But that's an issue that has not been dealt with for a decade.
Right.
So that's the extent of how big these issues really are here.
All right. One of the things that Governor Rendell has become in recent weeks is a reformer. You know, he now talks about term limits. He talks about reducing the size of the legislature. It's kind of fascinating because he's talking about areas of state government that he doesn't have anything to say about. I mean, at least legally, John, right?
Yeah, oh, that's right. Now, in fairness, I should tell you that his top staff at the end of last calendar year, after he was reelected, did talk about these items. I mean, they said these are things that he believes should be done, and these are things that he will work on doing. But you're right. I mean, he hasn't. It would be hard to label him as a reformer. He hasn't spent a lot of political capital on any of these items: merit selection, term limits, size of the legislature, and they are things that don't affect the executive.
Right.
I mean, there are other branches. I mean, you would think...
So it's easy to talk about them.
Very easy to talk about. Quite a different story to invest in.
Yeah.
The one where he did have some impact, though, is this new open records proposal.
Right.
A 50-year-old state law hasn't been touched in any meaningful way for a decade or better. The one thing the governor did push in a proposal that he put out earlier this year was to change what's known as the presumption in the law. State law right now assumes that all records are closed with limited exceptions unless you can prove otherwise. He pushed language that would start from the premise that all records are public. And what we've since seen is that the legislative proposals that are the leading legislative proposal has since changed that presumption as well. So that is one area of reform where he has had something of an impact.
Yeah, you know, other governors in the past have sort of paid lip service to some of these reforms as well. You know, in a sense, he doesn't really. I mean, does he really think the legislature is going to put itself, legislators are going to put themselves out of work? I mean, isn't that, in a sense, what most of these major reforms would do?
Yeah, the proposals that, and we had the House Reform Commission, the proposals they rejected were all what I termed would have redistributed power, or maybe leveled the playing field between an incumbent lawmaker and a challenger in an election. And they don't want anything to do with that. In the Senate, you have a few senators pushing for that because other newcomers, Senator Fulmer, Senator Eichelberger, I think their political future, they realize that if they don't change something there, they may not be back. But what the legislators seem to be going for is more disclosure. As former Governor Ridge used to say, disclosure is the best, sunlight is the best, disinfectant. Now, whether that you agree with that or not, or whether people want to go further and really radically change the makeup of the legislature, it remains to be seen.
Yeah, one of the reforms, before we go to break, one of the reforms that I think the House did, you all correct me, House did something with, but the Senate hasn't, is ending these so-called sign or die sessions where a lot of legislators who have been voted out of office cast votes that they wouldn't probably cast to do legislation that they wouldn't probably pass.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great idea. People that have been voted out of office who aren't going to be around anymore for whatever reason shouldn't be voting on anything, in my view. They should just end those sessions. I think the House did do that.
The Senate.
The Senate.
It's a constitutional amendment, though.
So it's going to take 5 years or so.
5 years. All right, we're going on break. When we come back, we're going to continue with our 6-month review. How's the governor doing? What's going on in the legislature? We'll do that and more after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by Pennsylvania Medical Society. Doctors and patients, preserve the relationship. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
Hi, welcome back. We're doing a 6-month review of Governor Rendell and the legislature with John Micek, Robert Swift, and John Baer, journalists and columnists all. John Baer, something historic took place in January. This had never happened before in Pennsylvania history. A Democratic majority in the House, 1-vote majority, elected a Republican Speaker, Denny O'Brien from Philadelphia. That had never been done. As I said, maybe O'Brien is really a Democrat. He just happens to have an R in front of his name. Take it from there.
Well, most Republicans in Philadelphia are more Democrat than Republican, which is why Ed Rendell had such a shock when he first came to Harrisburg. He had been used throughout his career to dealing with those kinds of Republicans. He had never met a real Republican. But Denny O'Brien, I think, has really done. I mean, he has been a man on a tightrope. I mean, a kind of a man without a land, and I think so far has done a fine job. I mean, they haven't tackled the tough issues that we talked about earlier, the big issues that would change, as RB suggests, the balance of power. But they have done some things that would not have been done, in my view, had Denny O'Brien not been the Speaker. Yeah. He's been voting with Democrats on key issues, much to the chagrin of a lot of the conservative Republicans in the House. But he's been doing it in a way that is kind of moderate. I mean, he hasn't wielded this gavel unilaterally, and that's a good sign, I think.
John, you followed him.
Yes.
The Republicans in the House certainly don't think he's a part of their caucus. I think at one point suggested that he's not been. You agree with John's assessment? I
do. I mean, I've been told Denny has made appearances in the House Republican caucuses and has been about as welcome as a case of the flu or something. But You know, it is a very difficult act. In the past week or so, he's been fending off attacks from Representative John Baer, a Republican from Pittsburgh, who seems to have appointed himself the GOP hitman here, to try to maneuver Denny into some difficult situations that the Republicans might be able to use against him.
Yeah, but essentially
later on.
Go ahead.
But no, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Finish your thought.
But I mean, in effect, he was the moving force behind this reform commission that spent the first 6 months of looking at various procedural things. So he has, I think, tried to strike a fairly bipartisan tone and has been successful to that end.
Yeah, but in essence, he's really been Rendell's guy. He's really done whatever the House Democratic leadership has wanted. I mean,
that's correct. Now, one thing he wants to do is, and this would be truly, I think, he wants to create what's called an independent speaker's office with its own money. That's his goal. Whether that can ever, that office has been around for 300 years. Yeah. Whether that can happen, I don't know. But on these, you saw it on the vote last weekend to non-concur in the Senate budget. He was, one of the.
He voted with the Democrats to essentially setting up the stage for non-concurrent. That's led to the current.
And I think he had Dave Stile, a Bucks County Republican, with him on that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, one of the things that's sort of remarkable, and you guys have followed this, Democrats in the House have been in the wilderness for 14 years. They came out of the wilderness with this one vote. And Governor Rendell has really needed those Democrats to march in lockstep for his program. Otherwise, I think his second term would have been very much in jeopardy.
No question. Terry, you're absolutely right. That one vote majority makes all the difference in the world, because now of the three main players in any critical time, whether it's budget or whether it's a piece of legislation, you have the executive branch and the House against the Senate when it breaks down to ideology. Now, it's such a slim margin over there. And we've seen so many bizarre and wonderful things in the past. You never know how long it will hold.
That's right. So this idea of an independent speakership, John, how far, that has little chance, in my judgment, of being around.
We're to see what happens in another year and a half or so.
Especially if the Democrats were to gain, 4 or 5 more seats, or the Republicans.
I mean, just to give you one quick example, Terry, late last week, Danny Sura, a Democrat from L County, had a heart attack. And Harold James, a Democrat from Philadelphia, had some respiratory problem. Within an hour, there were rumors that John Purcell was now going to mount a comeback because there may not be votes on the floor to stop him.
All right, we're going to continue with our assessment of the first 6 months. We're getting into some of the details that I'm sure you're all fascinated with, and we'll do that when we return.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Credit Union Association. Pennsylvania Credit Unions, where people are worth more than money. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the State System of Higher Education. 14 state-owned universities. The state system is the largest provider of higher education in Pennsylvania. And by the Hospital and Health System Association of Pennsylvania, working towards a healthy Pennsylvania.
Hi, welcome back to our 6-month review of the goings-on in the state capitol with John Micek, Robert Swift, and John Baer. Robert, let's start with this. A political revolution in the state. I think we're all in agreement as a result of the pay hike. 55 new members end up in the legislature, some because of resignation, some because of, the primary and general election defeats. These 55 come to change the culture in Harrisburg. How are they doing?
I'm somewhat disappointed with them as a group. I think myself, it would have been truly revolutionary if the 50 had combined as a unit from both party caucuses. There's 50 in the House, and had sort of become a force together. Instead, in my view, they seem to be following their appendages of the caucuses, and when they get upset about something, they're acting in the role of a caucus. And I think some Republicans came up to the newsroom as a group, freshman Republicans last week, to complain about the procedure on transportation. I find over the years that many freshmen that get here, they seem to get in the caucus, and they can't. It takes about 3 terms to realize, hey, you need votes on the other side to get something done.
That's right. The other thing about it is that other than, and we talked about the 2 new guys in the Senate, Senator Fulmer from Lebanon County and Senator Eichelberger from Blair County and some other counties out there, they've actually been pretty aggressive, having press conferences and doing press releases and all of that. But is Robert right about this?
If you think about it, every sitcom only has 1 or 2 breakout stars. The rest are just sort of supporting players. And I mean, that's really what it is. In the Senate, you have Fulmer and Eichelberger. And over in the House, you've got Gene DePasquale, a Democrat of York, who sort of stepped up and made a name for himself as kind of the reform guy among the House Democrats. There's really, I don't know if there's anyone among the House Republicans that I've been able to distinguish out of the pack yet who sort of stepped in to fill that role. But yeah, of the 50 some odd who came out of that last election cycle, really you've only had 2 or 3 who have established themselves as personalities.
But John, look, you've been writing about this for a long time, particularly about the culture. The culture gets all self-absorbing. You get up there, you get into the state capitol, and you find that if you want to get anything, you've got to go along with what, I mean, is it that tough to change the culture?
Oh, I think it is. I mean, I think it's like glacial to change to change the culture in there. And RB's point is a great one. The opportunity missed was the unity of reform and newcomers. Had they done that, they might have been able to make a difference. Particularly in the House where the margin is so small, they could have controlled some things and demanded some things. That didn't happen. Instead, they've each kind of tried to go their own separate way. I mean, I laugh out loud when I get press releases from freshman lawmakers who are questioning Governor Rendell's position on anything, you know, as if that's a press release from a freshman member is going to make a difference by and of itself. Had 55 people stood in one place and said, you know, we don't like this, we'd like this to happen.
So before we go to break in another subject, I'm going to ask you, you know, give me sort of a yes or no, if I can get yes or no out of columnists. That's not easy to do. They've had the freshmen, the revolt that took place in the state, in terms of, they've had some modest success in internally changing the processes. But overall, their impact has not been revolutionary. They've not changed the culture. I mean, you basically agree with that?
I do basically agree with that, with the exception that even those minor changes inside the process do make a difference in the overall process.
John.
Yes. I agree with John on this one. The procedural changes have mattered, but in the way that reform really matters, a change in the culture and a change in the end product. We're still here in the first week of July, and there's no state budget. It's a failure there.
I would say procedurally, we're still watching all these bills, say, for 2 weeks at the end of June, or go in here every day, and you're not really sure what they're going to do. So they're better at putting notice out of the bills on the calendar. So I'm disappointed.
Yeah. But as we go to, but again, let me just make this observation. In the House, in the last couple of weeks, they've had some. They've suspended their own rules. They voted on some things, and traditionally the way they voted on, which means that at a whim, they can still go back and play the game the way they used to play it. It's a case of if they want to spend a lot of money and everybody's in agreement with what they're going to get out of it, then that's okay. Am I wrong about that?
No, you're right.
You're right.
All right. All right, we'll be back for the final segment of Pennsylvania Newsmakers after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by Highmark Blue Shield, changing the way health plans work for business with a variety of plan options for employers and more choices for employees. Information is available at highmark.com. Have a greater hand in your company's health. And by the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association, the future of long-term care. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Builders Association, building today for a better tomorrow. And by the Pennsylvania Cyber Charter School, bringing educational innovation and freedom to the children of Pennsylvania.
Welcome back to our panel of reporters and columnists. We're chatting about the state government, the 6 months in review, particularly Governor Rendell and the state legislature. John Baer, you've written a lot in your career about Governor Rendell. You've covered him for a long time. Every time I run into people, no matter where it is, I get this question. What is Governor Rendell's future? How many times do you get asked that question?
Well, I mean, it's frequent cocktail talk. There's no.
Well, let's continue the. We don't have any drinks. We only have water here. But go ahead.
Despite the governor's protestations, he has an interest in national office, be it elective or appointed. I believe that if a Democrat were to win the White House, and he finishes his second term as he has pledged to do, he would take any cabinet post, despite the fact that he says, I'm not qualified for the ones I want, and I don't want the ones I'm qualified for. I think he would take a cabinet post in a heartbeat.
The things he might want would be the presidency, but that seems to be structurally. Go ahead, John.
I'm not even convinced he's going to last out a second term.
Governor Knoll? Catherine Baker Knoll?
Okay, there may be enough reason right there, but pardon me, Lieutenant Governor, but there's only one reason why a governor comes out with as ambitious a second term agenda.
Yep.
as he has, particularly when it comes to alternative energy, which is one of these sort of real bleeding edge kind of things that only a few states are engaging in. I am convinced that he's either gunning for EPA administrator or Secretary of Energy in a Democratic presidential administration.
Yeah. Robert, you've been around a long time. Years 7 and 8, for any governor, do they matter? What? They lose interest. Schaap ran for the presidency. Thornburg couldn't wait to go be Attorney General. Ridge left. He didn't even stay. Is John right? Is this about the next 2 years maybe for Rendell? And then
it's becoming fashionable now for politicians, elected officials to say, you know, I have 1,000 days left on the job. We're going to do something every day. Mayor Bloomberg's doing that in New York City. Yeah. So they're trying to. That's the new way to try and get over that. But your staff starts to leave. Your top people you get burned out. You know, Governor Rendell has already had changes in that, and he already had some second-term shockers like the mess with the roads back in February. Mm-hmm. So that sort of stuff does start to come into play here, and he also with these agenda, he's just going to have what he doesn't get this year will be harder in progressive years.
Mm-hmm. John, Micek, let me ask you this question. Given these changes that we've been talking about in the legislature, there's a lot of I've never seen a legislature more unsettled, more unsure about what it should do. John Baer talked earlier about sort of these ideological differences. Yeah. Is this legislature ready to take over the leadership of the state from Governor Rendell? Should somehow, some way, this agenda not work out in the next couple of years?
I think that's. I don't know about the House, but I think that is true in the Senate, where you see Senator Joe Scarnati, the President Pro Tem, and Dominic Pileggi, the Majority Leader, now sticking out very firm ideological ground in opposition to Governor Rendell. I think if there's a leadership vacuum, I think now they are trying to stake out that ground, realizing that maybe all they have to do is wait him out for 2 years or thereabouts, and even if he is here, they'll have 07 and 08 where they can really make their influence felt.
All right, we only have about a minute left, and I may only have time to ask John Baer this question. John Baer, one of the things that comes up repeatedly, and more so since we have this gun violence in the cities, particularly in the Philadelphia area and city mayors all over, they want the gun control. Yeah. It's a tough issue. Governor Rendell wants to do it, but he's not made this sort of a do-or-die thing right now. Where's all that going to go?
Well, he pushed it off to the fall. I thought the Black Caucus, 17 members strong, might have had an opportunity to do something during the budget, and they did get some committee votes that they were interested in. But there is still not the will in this legislature to do gun control. I think they can get marginal things. Yep. I think they can get things that can affect guns. Yep. But I don't see them getting
we may have you back. That's an important subject that we ought to get into in greater detail. All right, thanks for watching Pennsylvania Newsmakers. We'll see you next week, and stay well.